Today we're talking about the best items to use when your teammates suck. And that's not quite summarizing what this is about, but I figured that would be a catchy title that explains it a little bit better than any other way I've tried. The point here with these items is that they are still good across any level of play and they will always have value, but in certain levels of play they just have more value, or specifically they have more value when your team is not playing properly as a team, when the damage dealers are not doing the damage that they're supposed to, or similar situations, or when you just feel like you have to carry more in one way or another, and depending on the character that may not be that easy. As a support it's not that easy to tank. These items can be used on any level of play, from basically not even conquest to casual to low tier ranked, mid tier ranked, high tier ranked, and then basically all the way up to competitive. But the value you get out of them in competitive in a coordinated team will never be as high as it would be with a team that doesn't work together. There are a few items here for different classes, and we're gonna start with Mystical Mail. Mystical Mail is extremely good when your team is not putting out the damage they're supposed to. The role that primarily picks up Mystical Mail are obviously solo laners, typically warriors and sometimes guardians, because they have that room for those defensive aggressive options. Mystical Mail comes with 300 health, 40 physical protection, 20% crowd control reduction, and all enemies within 25 units are dealt 40 magical damage per second. With 2,700 gold, this has quite a high price tag, and that is why, especially in competitive, is often not that valued over other items that allow for more quick direct aggression or more specific defense. The high health pool here is nice, but 40 physical protection isn't out of this world. The high price tag is also what makes it hard to pick up for other roles. I do believe that it has a place on certain bruiser junglers. We've actually seen that even in competitive. So again, the value being higher on lower levels of play, it is better there. And it can also, in rare situations, be built on support. But if you're building Mystical Mail on support, please do not make the mistake of building it around third or fourth item. It is way too expensive at that point, and you need items that help your team more first in order to get into the place that you want to be in the game before you can even consider something like Mystical Mail. If you realize that in late game your team is not putting out enough, then you can consider Mystical Mail, so whatever, around the 5th, 6th item. So what makes Mystical Mail so good? It's a good foundation with a high base health, so that can help with any later defense items being built. It has crowd control reduction, which allows you to engage much harder for your team, and even if you go into a fight and they don't immediately follow up, you don't get punished quite as hard. And obviously the aura. The aura not only helps you clear waves quicker, which can be beneficial depending on the character, but it also puts out a lot of damage in team fights. And this damage should not be undervalued. First of all, this damage is magical, and if you look at a classic team comp, then you typically have a physical hunter, a physical jungler, and a physical solo laner, leaving you with a support and the mage or mid laner to do magical damage. Sometimes your mage just doesn't pull those damage numbers, and in that moment you're kinda just reliant on the support's damage, who's busy setting up, who doesn't really deal much damage, so your magical damage will be significantly lower compared to your physical damage. That's not always the case, but often. And in those situations, having an extra source of magical damage means it's probably gonna go through almost unmitigated because the enemies won't be building much magical defense. As such, Mystical Mail is a very nice addition here, especially on a physical character, to get some more damage output of other kinds and make up for the lack of damage that your mid laner may have. The tick damage happens to, at the same time, be an excellent counter against stealth guards, even low-key because you will roughly know where he is, which is something that many lower elo players especially struggle with too, so it's just a nice bonus on top. Now many people tend to think that Mystical isn't that good late game, and they're technically not wrong. In late game everyone will have their highest defenses possible, so obviously Mystical Mail's damage output is not quite as high, and you also have the health pool of everyone that you have to get through first. But let's look at a scenario with some targets with different kinds of defense. For this example, I chose 5 targets, or up to 5 targets rather, and 2 of them have their base defenses of 49. This could be a hunter, it could be a mage, just anyone with relatively low defenses. Then you have a 1 target with 89 defense. This would be your assassin with like 1 magical item, 1 magical defense item, 1 bruiser item. And then you have a target with 168 magical defense. This could be your warrior, your solo laner, and 173, and this could be your guardian. Those are just some values I pulled from putting a few builds together for different guards to see how much defense they would roughly have. And based on that, we can see how much damage our Mystical Mail will deal. With one tick on a single target against one of the squishies, you'll deal 27 damage. Multiply that by 2 for both of the squishies, you're at 54 damage. If you hit the assassin as well with Mystical Mail, you're at 75 damage in total. 75 damage across 3 targets in a second without doing anything but being there isn't bad. That's on top of your normal damage. If you have another target on top of that, being the warrior, you would have 90 damage, and with a guardian or the support, it would be 104 damage. So 104 damage in a second if you're in the middle of a team, but realistically you're probably just hitting 3 people most of the time. But now, as a tankier character, you will be in the middle of a fight for a while. You won't just be gone immediately after 1 second. So let's look at 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, to a single target, the damage is 188. To 2 targets is 376. To 3 targets is 524. And then we can theoretically go up to 5 targets and have 731. But 524 damage across 3 different targets in 10 seconds is not bad at all. It's a good way of distributing some damage, kind of setting up a little bit of damage for your teammates that way, for example, for executes and similar, or just generally hurting the health pool in a team fight. And looking at 20 seconds, you can go up to 1,273 damage against 3 targets, or 1,775 damage against 5 targets. So being in a team fight for a long time with Mystical Mail will do a massive amount of damage. You won't always be there for 20 seconds, you will often have to back out earlier. But if you have a tankier character, this is absolutely an option. If it wasn't distributed across multiple targets, it could basically be a squishy's entire health pool. And again, this item still has great stats either way, so it's not like you're sacrificing a lot except for a little bit of extra gold. But that is not the only item. There's another one which is especially good for supports, but also good for solo laners, being Emperor's Armor. Decent defensive stats with 250 health and 40 physical protection for only 2000 gold, but the big deal in this case is absolutely the aura. Damageable enemy structures within 55 units have their attack speed decreased by 30%. Damageable allied structures within 55 units have their attack speed increased by 40%. This item is therefore obviously better for defending than it is for sieging, but it's great for both. I don't need to do the math here because Emilzy already did it a long time ago with this Emilzy Playground doc. I will link that down below if I remember. And in that you will see that after 10 seconds, the total damage that a Phoenix would have dealt to you is 5,700. If you, however, had Emperor's Armor, then the total damage taken would be 3,360, and you would have avoided 2,340 damage just through the attack speed reduction of the passive. And we can look a little bit further into this and can look at what would happen if we had 150 physical protection doing the same thing. In that case, the total damage would be 2,280, whereas with Emperor's Armor, you would only take 1,344, and you would therefore avoid 936 damage. That's again on top of the physical protection and the health that you get from the item anyways. This is just a direct protection of the stats itself. So depending on your protection value as a tank, you will avoid anywhere between 1,170 and 668 damage, just under that Phoenix. When your team isn't that great, this makes a massive difference as it gives them a lot more room to either fight under the Phoenix, which they will probably do even if you don't want to, or to take down the Phoenix. It will also help them if anyone else gets the Phoenix aggro because they have a little bit more time to get out, because you don't necessarily have to be the one tanking for the effect of Emperor's Armor. Likewise, if your team is under siege and you're already behind, then the buff that you get from this is crazy good as well. The damage increase ranges basically from around 2,640 to 1,131 depending on how much protection the enemy has, but in either case it will do a lot for you. So while both of these items are technically defensive items, they have a very good offensive function for you as well and can really help you out. I didn't want to leave aggressive options completely unmentioned though. I think there are 2 that are very good, and those are Bloodforge and Soul Eater. In the case of Bloodforge, is down to the passive. You just get a ridiculous amount of snowballing from using this item and getting a kill in a team fight. If you're responsible for most of the kills on your team, then having that shield and having that extra movement speed to basically go from kill to kill can be extremely effective. That's why especially Thanatos players often use this item, because they think they have the snowball potential. With this item, really consider if you have that snowball potential or if it's just your ego telling you do. The other item, Soul Eater, is a little bit less about the passive but more about the item as a whole. Soul Eater has a lot of power, a lot of lifesteal, and a bit of cooldown reduction as well as mana, so it has a very good balance of stats, especially when the enemy doesn't have too much protection, so you don't need too much pen, and also when the enemy is not building anti-heal. When your team is bad, there's a good chance the enemy team is bad too, and if that's the case, then they will most likely not invest heavily into anti-heal. In which case, Soul Eater is an excellent item with a mix of damage and lifesteal, because that way you get the full healing, and as long as Soul Eater is not countered, it is an extremely strong item. And that's it for the best items when your team sucks and you have to do all the work for them. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful. If you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.